The golden light of the setting sun bathed the streets of Rosario in a soft, amber glow, stretching shadows across the familiar pavement. Lionel Messi walked at an easy pace, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, his gaze moving over the buildings and sidewalks that had once been the backdrop to his childhood. Time had changed much, yet there was an unshakable familiarity to it all, a sense of home that no stadium, no grand city in the world, could replace. The streets carried memories in their quiet corners, in the rusting goalposts still standing at the end of alleyways, in the scuffed walls where countless footballs had bounced and rebounded over the years. Here, in this very neighborhood, he had first discovered the game that would come to define his life. He could almost hear the echoes of his younger self, the scurry of small feet chasing after a worn-out ball, the shouts of friends calling for a pass, the unmistakable thrill of a goal scored against the run of play. As he moved further down the street, the scent of warm empanadas wafted from a nearby bakery, blending with the crisp evening air. A small grocery store stood at the corner, the same one where he had once run errands for his mother, stopping only to juggle an orange on his feet before returning home. An old man sat outside on a wooden stool, watching the world with a knowing gaze. Messi recognized him instantly, one of the many faces from his past, a silent observer of the years that had passed in this neighborhood. The murmur of everyday life filled the air, voices drifting from open windows, the hum of a passing motorbike, the rustling of leaves overhead. And then, breaking through it all, came the unmistakable sound that had shaped his very existence, the rhythmic, unbroken pattern of a ball being kicked. He turned his head toward a small neighborhood park, its chain-link fence slightly bent in places, a testament to years of stray shots and hurried climbs over the barrier. Inside, a group of boys played under the fading light, their laughter rising above the steady thud of the ball meeting their feet. It was a sight so familiar, so deeply woven into the fabric of his memories, that for a moment, he simply stood there, watching. Their game was chaotic yet full of raw joy, passes intercepted, shots taken from impossible angles, some finding the net, others rolling off into the dirt. There was no referee, no rules beyond the ones they instinctively followed. It was the kind of football that had first ignited his love for the game, the kind where the score didn't matter as much as the thrill of the play itself. One boy dribbled with sharp, quick movements, evading a defender before losing control at the last second. Another ran to retrieve the ball, his laughter ringing out as he stumbled slightly on the uneven ground. The smallest player of the group hesitated near the goal, uncertain, shifting his weight from one foot to the other as though unsure whether he truly belonged in the game. Messi felt a quiet pull toward the scene before him. He had once been just like them, a boy with a ball and a dream, playing until the streetlights flickered on and mothers called their children home. Now, he stood on the other side of time, watching the next generation live out the same story he had once known so well. Without thinking, he took a step closer, drawn in not by nostalgia alone, but by something deeper, something that reminded him why he had fallen in love with the game in the first place. And the game continued, unaware of the legend standing just beyond the fence, watching with the eyes of someone who had never truly left these streets behind. The ball skipped unevenly across the worn-down grass, bouncing off a stray rock before landing at the feet of a boy who barely had time to react. He scrambled to control it, his touch too heavy, sending it rolling toward a cluster of players rushing to intercept. The game was wild, unpredictable, full of energy but lacking precision. A misplaced pass here, a mistimed shot there, yet none of it seemed to dampen the excitement coursing through the group. Messi remained by the fence, his eyes following the fast-moving play, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It was a scene he had lived 1,000 times before, an unfiltered kind of football played not for trophies or glory but for the sheer love of the game. These boys played the way he once had, on uneven ground with makeshift goalposts and no rules beyond those they decided in the moment. A sharp cry of frustration cut through the air as one player sent the ball sailing too far. It rolled toward the sideline, coming to a stop near where Messi stood. One of the boys jogged over to retrieve it, glancing up just as he bent down to scoop the ball into his arms. For a moment, he froze, blinking in disbelief. The realization spread through him like wildfire. He straightened abruptly, his wide-eyed expression shifting from confusion to sheer astonishment. His mouth moved, forming words that didn't need to be heard to be understood. One name, spoken with a mixture of disbelief and uncontained joy, was all it took. The reaction was instant. The game halted mid-play as every child turned toward the fence, their faces reflecting the same stunned recognition. The atmosphere, once filled with the carefree rhythm of their match, shifted into something electric. The boys stood motionless for a split second before erupting into a blur of movement, some running forward, others covering their mouths in shock, and a few hesitating as if afraid the moment would vanish if they moved too quickly. Excitement pulsed through them as they crowded around, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Some clutched their heads, others looked at one another to confirm they were all seeing the same thing. The legendary Lionel Messi, the very icon they had spent countless hours emulating in their backyards, was standing right in front of them. Phones were fumbled with, hands reaching for pockets, eager to capture the moment. But before anyone could raise a camera, Messi's expression changed slightly, a small, knowing look that carried something more than just the weight of recognition. There was a quiet offer in his stance, an unspoken suggestion. Instead of reaching for a pen or posing for a picture, he gestured toward the ball still cradled in the boy's arms. The request was simple, direct, yet so unexpected that the children hesitated, glancing at one another in stunned silence. Then, realization struck, and their faces lit up all at once. The answer came in the form of an eruption of cheers, hands waving frantically, feet shuffling to make space. The game was back on, but now, it carried a different weight. This was no longer just a casual match between friends, this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment, a dream unfolding before their very eyes. Messi stepped onto the makeshift pitch, his movements relaxed, unassuming. He didn't demand the ball, didn't take command of the play. Instead, he blended into the rhythm of the game, passing lightly, moving effortlessly between the players as if he had always been part of their team. The children, still caught between wonder and adrenaline, took a few minutes to adjust, their movements slightly more rushed, their eagerness spilling into their actions. The ball came to Messi's feet, and for a second, time seemed to slow. All eyes locked onto him, waiting, anticipating something magical. But instead of launching into an impossible dribble or taking an outrageous shot, he did something far more unexpected. He played simply. A gentle touch, a short pass, an encouraging glance toward the boy receiving the ball. No tricks, no theatrics, just pure, effortless football. His presence alone was enough to lift their spirits, to sharpen their focus. Confidence began to replace hesitation, their movements growing bolder, their laughter ringing louder. One boy attempted a pass that barely reached its intended target, and instead of looking embarrassed, he grinned as Messi gestured for him to try again. Another player, emboldened by the moment, took a shot from a ridiculous angle. It missed by a mile, but instead of frustration, he turned toward Messi with a sheepish grin, receiving only an approving nod in return. The game, once filled with scattered chaos, took on a new shape. Messi wasn't there to dominate, he was there to inspire. And with each touch, each pass, he did exactly that. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the field, elongating their shadows as they moved. For the children, time no longer existed, only this moment, this game, this surreal reality where the greatest player in the world was not just watching them but playing alongside them. The ball zipped from one end of the field to the other, laughter and shouts filling the air. Mistakes were made, recoveries followed, and through it all, Messi remained a quiet force in the game, guiding, supporting, encouraging. It wasn't about winning. It never had been. It was about the love of the game, the simple, unbreakable joy of playing. And in that small neighborhood park in Rosario, under the soft glow of the setting sun, a group of children learned that football, at its purest, was never about who was the best. It was about the moments shared, the lessons learned, and the memories created with every pass, every shot, every touch. And for them, this was a moment that would live in their hearts forever. The game flowed like an untamed river, unpredictable yet full of life. The children dashed across the makeshift field, their laughter ringing through the air, their movements fueled by pure excitement. Every pass, every touch of the ball carried an extra spark now, a new energy drawn from the presence of Lionel Messi among them. The rhythm of play had changed, not in speed or intensity, but in meaning. They weren't just playing anymore, they were living a moment that would become legend in their own minds. Yet, not everyone shared the same joy. On the outskirts of the game, near one of the worn-down goalposts, a boy named Tomas lingered with uncertainty. He was younger than most of the others, a little smaller, a little slower. His touches on the ball lacked confidence, his passes were often too weak or misplaced, and his dribbles ended with the ball slipping away too easily. While the rest of the group reveled in the game, Tomas carried a different energy, one of hesitation, of self-doubt. He had tried, in the beginning. He had run alongside the others, had taken a few touches, had even attempted a pass that barely reached its intended target. But with each mistake, his shoulders slumped a little more, his movements grew more timid. The excitement that had filled him when Messi first joined the game had slowly faded into something heavier, something that made his feet feel heavier every time he tried to move with the ball. A particularly clumsy attempt at a shot had been the final blow. The ball had barely lifted off the ground before rolling harmlessly into an opponent's feet. Tomas had frozen, heat rushing to his face as the game continued around him. No one had laughed at him, no one had called him out, but that didn't matter. He felt it anyway, the embarrassment, the frustration, the quiet voice inside him whispering that he didn't belong here. So he did what he always did when he felt this way. He stepped back. Bit by bit, he drifted away from the center of play, his presence shrinking into the background. His movements became hesitant, almost reluctant, as if he hoped no one would notice he had removed himself from the game. He watched as the others played, their excitement a stark contrast to the disappointment weighing inside his chest. But someone did notice. Messi, moving with effortless grace between the young players, had seen the boy's gradual retreat. He had noticed the small changes, the slow steps backward, the way his hands found their way to his sides instead of staying ready for a pass, the way his eyes lowered every time the ball moved toward him. Messi had seen that boy before. He had seen him in the reflection of himself when he was young, standing on the sidelines of games that felt too big for him. He had seen him in the lonely hours spent proving himself, trying to convince others, and himself, that he deserved to be on the field. He had seen that boy in his own memories, in the nights he had spent wondering if he would ever be enough. Without hesitation, Messi made his way toward Tomas. The game continued around them, the others too caught up in the moment to notice the small shift happening on the edge of the field. Tomas, lost in his own thoughts, only realized Messi was standing near him when a shadow crossed his vision. His eyes flickered upward, widening as he saw who had approached. In Messi's hands was the ball. His expression was calm, warm, absent of any judgment. There was no disappointment in his gaze, no impatience, only quiet understanding. The weight of the moment settled between them, but Messi carried it with ease, as if it were the lightest thing in the world. He held the ball out, an invitation rather than a demand. Tomas hesitated, his fingers twitching slightly at his sides. A swirl of emotions tugged at him, doubt, fear, the lingering frustration of his mistakes. But then there was something else, something softer, something that made his heart beat just a little steadier. It was the realization that Messi wasn't giving him the ball because he had to. He was giving it to him because he believed he deserved it. Tentatively, Tomas reached forward, his hands closing around the ball. It was solid beneath his fingers, grounding, reassuring. He glanced up again, meeting Messi's gaze, and for the first time in the game, he felt something other than embarrassment. He felt seen. The game hadn't stopped for them. The other children continued playing, their movements unbroken, unaware of the quiet moment unfolding just a few feet away. But for Tomas, everything had paused, as if the world had given him a second to reset, to breathe. Messi didn't move right away. He simply stood there, giving Tomas time to process, to feel, to understand what this moment meant. And then, after a few lingering seconds, a small, encouraging nod. A message without words. Everyone starts somewhere. Tomas' fingers curled a little tighter around the ball. His breath came a little easier. His shoulders, once slumped with the weight of self-doubt, straightened just a little. And in that moment, for the first time since the game began, he didn't feel like he didn't belong. He felt like a player. The match carried on around them, but something had changed. Tomas had changed. And Messi, with nothing more than a simple gesture, had made sure of it. Tomas held the ball tightly against his chest, his fingers pressing into the rough patches of its surface. The weight of it felt different now, not just the familiar heaviness of the leather but something deeper, something that tugged at the emotions stirring within him. Messi remained beside him, his presence calm, patient, offering no urgency, no expectation. The game continued in the background, the shouts and laughter of the other boys weaving into the warm air, but for Tomas, it all seemed distant, like a world apart from the moment he now found himself in. Messi knelt down, bringing himself to Tomas' level, his posture relaxed, his eyes filled with something that felt a lot like understanding. He began to speak, his words flowing with the ease of someone recounting a memory that had long since settled into the deepest parts of his heart. He painted a picture of a boy, small, almost invisible among the taller, stronger players on the field. A boy who, despite his love for football, was often overlooked, dismissed with quiet glances and murmured doubts. He spoke of how that boy would dribble tirelessly, would practice late into the evening, his feet moving over the ball as if it were an extension of himself. But no matter how hard he worked, there were always those who believed he wouldn't make it, who saw only his size and not his skill. Tomas listened intently, his grip on the ball loosening slightly as the story unfolded. The boy had been told, again and again, that he wasn't enough, not fast enough, not strong enough, not built for the game that he loved more than anything in the world. Scouts had watched him play, shaking their heads, their judgments etched into the way they turned away without a second glance. Clubs had rejected him, their words echoing in his mind, a constant reminder that his dream was not one they believed in. But the boy had not stopped. Even when the rejection stung, even when the obstacles seemed insurmountable, he had kept going. He had continued to play, to improve, to push past the limitations that others had placed on him. Not because he wanted to prove them wrong, but because football was in his blood, in his heart, and no one's doubts, not even his own, could take that away from him. Tomas' eyes remained fixed on Messi, absorbing every word. The boy's story had not been easy. When the opportunity had finally come, the chance to chase his dream on a larger stage, it had come at a cost. It had meant leaving behind his home, his family, everything he had ever known. It had meant traveling to a foreign country, where the language was unfamiliar, where the streets felt colder, where the absence of his loved ones was a constant ache in his chest. At night, he had wondered if he had made the right choice. But he had played. Through loneliness, through doubt, through the fear of failure, he had played. He had taken every mistake, every stumble, every missed opportunity, and turned them into lessons. He had understood that greatness was never about being the best from the start, it was about persistence, about getting up after every fall, about learning, growing, and believing in something even when no one else did. The game behind them carried on, but the sounds of it no longer mattered. Tomas' fingers brushed over the ball absent-mindedly, his mind turning over Messi's story, fitting the pieces together. He thought about the mistakes he had made, the way he had shrunk away from the game out of fear of failing again. He had convinced himself that his errors meant he wasn't good enough, that every misplaced pass and weak shot was proof that he didn't belong. But Messi's story told him something different. Mistakes weren't proof of failure. They were proof of effort. They were part of the journey, part of the process. The greatest players, the ones who had risen above doubt and expectation, had all started somewhere, had all made mistakes, had all faced obstacles that seemed too great to overcome. And yet, they had kept playing. Tomás exhaled slowly, his arms relaxing, the ball resting lightly in his hands. Messi's gaze held no pressure, no demand, only encouragement, only belief. It was a quiet reminder that the most important thing Tomás could do now wasn't to be perfect, wasn't to be the best player on the field. It was to try again. Because every mistake was just a step forward. And for the first time since the game had started, Tomás didn't feel like stepping away. He felt like stepping back in.